Good morning, CaneSport. It's the 2nd of December, 2024. I'm Gary Ferman, the publisher of CaneSport.com, joined this morning by our managing editor, Matt Shodell, and Stephen Wagner, as we discuss the news of the day, i.e., what is the future going to look like for the Miami Hurricanes? And guys, so much to talk about today, so much to unwrap. Obviously, the disappointing loss at Syracuse on Saturday, an absolute game changer for obvious reasons for Miami. The recruiting craziness that has gone on in the 36 hours or so since. And now we're waiting with bated breath for the College Football Playoff Committee to come out with its rankings on Tuesday night, because that is going to tell us a lot about what Miami's prospects might be here for the remainder of this 2024 season. So let's go through it all. I'm going to start with Saturday at Syracuse. The offense jumps out to a 21-0 lead and then goes to sleep in the second quarter and failed to capitalize on that early surge that they were able to make. And Syracuse chipped away and came back with their own extremely high level of execution on offense and caught the Hurricanes. And now you're in a knockdown, drag out game all the way to the end. And Syracuse had the ball bounce its way in the fourth quarter and got a little bit of an edge with the clock winding down. And we were able to hold on and beat the Hurricanes and knock Miami out of the ACC championship game. Possibly knock Miami out of the college football playoff, but we're going to talk about that here in a few minutes because that door may not be closed. And so, Matt, let me start with you. Let's just keep it simple. Your thoughts on what we saw Saturday in the Miami-Syracuse game.
I mean, it wasn't pretty. The first quarter was as good as I've seen Miami play, and then Syracuse goes on a 35-7 run. It's inexplicable. Mario Cristobal 4-9, I think it is now, in November, December games at Miami. It's inexcusable, and fans want answers. They want to know who to blame. Everyone wants to know who to blame. You can blame everybody, the players, the coaches. I thought going into it, I told people, on the show, I said, listen, take Syracuse in the points. I didn't say Syracuse was going to win, but I did say take Syracuse in the points. I thought the line was ridiculous. Syracuse is a good team offensively, but what was disappointing, and probably why the spread was 11.5 or 12 points at kickoff, is I think the expectation coming off the Wake Forest game was that Miami would have at least a little bit of defense. They'd have some sort of answer, because Syracuse doesn't really do anything you're not prepared for, which Meach Powell quickly pointed out after the game. They do the same thing over and over because they're successful at doing it. A team like Pittsburgh was able to essentially take advantage of Syracuse and get 5 interceptions. I think it was 2 or 3 return for touchdowns, because what they did, and what I thought Lance Guidry was going to do, because it's not that different a style of defense, honestly, this aggressive style of defense, is Kyle McCord loves to go to his first read. You saw it clearly in the game. For those of you who hadn't watched previous games, that's what he does. He gets the ball out quickly to his first read. It's why he has a lot of contested catches for his receivers. He throws into coverage. Whoever he's going to, he throws it to him. And when he doesn't immediately throw it, he gets into trouble. He gets sacked. He throws bad balls if he doesn't go to that first read. So what I thought Lance Guidry was going to do, and I didn't really say it on the show because, sort of was expected to be the secret for Miami, the secret sauce, is you show the guy a certain look where he thinks he has that first read, and then you jump it at the snap, right? That's what Pittsburgh did. That's what I thought Lance Guidry would do, but he didn't. And what you wound up seeing was Lance Guidry, you could call it throwing the kitchen sink. I know Miami fans said he didn't do a variety of things. The fans that I've read their comments, he kept doing the same thing over and over. Why does he keep doing the same thing over and over? I watched the game a second time. He threw everything that he had at Syracuse, but I think that was part of the problem. There was one play, for instance, the first play I think it was of the second half. Right, he rushed 3, dropped everyone into coverage. Kyle McCord couldn't go to his first read. Wound up getting sacked by the invisible man, who that's his nickname, Tyler Barron. He reappeared for this game. Then the very next play, Lance Guidry blitzes, okay, and they hit a 33-yard gain on Damari Brown, who just totally gave up the inside on his leverage. And that was sort of the story of the game, right? There was the first red zone where they had, I think it was a 3rd and 4 from the 8-yard line or somewhere in there. I'm not precisely sure, but Lance Guidry blitzes, brings 6 or 7 in that situation. Okay. And that's the play where they threw to the running back, Allen, with Akeem Messidor starting to rush and then realizing too late, oh, wait, the running back's not blocking me. You would think it would be max protect, right? We're blitzing. They're going to be max protect. Well, no. The running back went on a route. Akeem recognized it too late. There was no linebacker or safety behind him. And that goes for the first down. Probably would have gone for a touchdown if the running back doesn't fall down. Next time the similar play happens inside the 10-yard line where it was 2nd or 3rd down, this time Lance Guidry blitzes. I'm sorry, this time. Okay, that time Lance Guidry blitzes. The next time Lance Guidry dropped everybody, and he found that was the play where Darrell Porter's basically on the ground, and the receiver goes up above him to get the touchdown catch. Okay, he dropped everyone in coverage on that one. He rushed 4. So he did try to do all sorts of different things during the game. It wasn't all man-to-man, even though it looked like it on the outside. There was some zone in there. And you know what? It's just, it was a horror show on defense. And that's why I think fans were so upset that Mario Cristobal followed the analytics, which were kick a field goal, with 4 or 5 minutes left in the game, to go down by 4 because, hey, you have to stop them anyway, right? If you don't get the touchdown on the 4th and goal from the 10, you're still down by 7 points. Now they have the ball. You got to stop them anyway to get the ball back and try to get another touchdown. So, hey, if we got to stop them, let's stop them and get another touchdown, right? And that way you win the game at that point, instead of just tying it and going to overtime on the road or trying to get a 2-point conversion and, maybe losing on the road. So that was Mario's thought process. And in a normal game, I really don't have a problem with that in a normal game. But this is why analytics fail so often, because Miami can't stop Syracuse. Like, it was pretty obvious at that point. They had stopped him twice in the second half, once because of a fumble, and then the other time they stopped them, I think there was a penalty or there was something happened that was Syracuse's own fault. That was the only time they stopped him the whole second half. So if you try to go for that 4th and goal from the 10 and you get it and get a 2-point conversion, go up by 1, maybe you have a chance. Maybe some miraculous thing happens and you actually wind up stopping them. But the odds are against you, just not stopping them at that point, period. So, you sort of, it's a pick your poison. I probably lose either way, honestly, but it just looks bad when it went down the way it did. And it's just another reason why Miami fans get mad. I know Gary's shaking his head. Gary disagrees. I see why, go ahead.
Well, I was fighting this fight all day yesterday in the question and answer thread that I have on the website. And I understand the anger part of it, but imagine a head coach standing on the sideline of a tight college football game and sitting there sending the message to his defense, I think you suck, and I'm not going to give you an opportunity to make a stop and get us the ball back so we can go win the game. When the probability of converting 4th and 10, I don't have the analytics in front of me, but it can't have been 50%. I mean, no, you're going to fail on.
But why is this about sending a message to your defense? It's way past sending a message to your defense.
You have to give your defense a chance to make a play. You have to give your defense
a play either way, whether you kick a field goal or
in that situation.
Whether you kick a field goal or bury them at their 10, you still have to make a play on defense.
Listen, I'm going to throw this fact out right now. Okay, and I hope that when I say this, it puts this entire thing to rest, because Mario has earned a lot of blame for certain things the last few years. No argument. I thought he made bad decisions in the Georgia Tech game on field goals and things like that. Miami has the number 24 ranked defense in total defense in the country. Number 24. Okay. I'm just going to use Pittsburgh as an example. What do you think Pittsburgh has? Pittsburgh is ranked number 72 in the country on defense. When Pittsburgh played Syracuse, they held Syracuse to 13 points. Miami has a much better defense than Pittsburgh. They just played like crap the other day. Lance Guidry coached like crap the other day.
First of all, you're conflating.
But if you're the head coach, you got 4 minutes. Wait a minute. You got 4 minutes left in the game. You got 4 minutes left in the game. Now, let me ask you a question, Matt. You got 4 minutes left in the game. You're on the road. Okay, you got 4th and 10. Okay, you're going to coach to try to get the game into overtime? Like, did you watch the Georgia Tech game the other night after they dominated Georgia for the entire game and they ended up screwing up at the end by going to a prevent defense, and then the quarterback fumbled and they ended up in 8 overtimes and they ended up losing a game that they were dominating for one of the best upsets in college football this year? Listen, anything is bad when it doesn't work. Okay, it's easy to criticize when it doesn't work. There were 4 minutes left in the game. If they kicked the field goal, got to stop, got the ball back, went down and scored a touchdown, they win the game in regulation, and everybody thinks Mario's a genius. It didn't work out. Okay, it did not work out. And yeah, the defense sucked the whole night, and there's no argument from me on that. But I will point out that Miami has the number 24 defense over a 12-game sample size in the country. We can argue about the different levels of competition, whatever. Miami played some really good offenses this year, okay, that played really well on the day Miami played them. They still ended up with a number 24 defense. Pitt had number 72, held Syracuse to 13 points. Which defense had the better game plan when they played Syracuse? Okay, Lance Guidry, in all honesty, I love the guy. Like, he's a great dude. His press conferences are off the charts. He should be ashamed of himself for the game plan that he had Saturday and the way that those kids were trying to defend that offense, and how their defensive backs that are challenged to begin with were left on islands. There was never enough pressure on the quarterback, except for a few rare plays. It was a defensive debacle. No argument there at all. But when you're the head coach and you have to make a decision down the stretch of the game, you have to emotionally detach from that, and you got to make a sound decision. And I thought it was a sound decision to say, hey, let my defense get a stop, and let's get the ball back near midfield, and let's go score the winning touchdown and get the hell out of here and go to Charlotte. Steven, before I get back to Matt, why don't you play referee on this subject, since you've heard.
Well, first of all, just so you know, Gary, I was trying to stop you because your 24th ranked defense is a wrong stat. You keep
number 24 in total defense.
They have the 60th ranked scoring defense, and they have the 42nd ranked third down conversion defense. Those are the two numbers that matter. Anyway,
well, they all matter, but they are the number 24 team in the country in total defense.
60 scoring defense in the country. They don't stop anybody. Number 60,
Miami,
and that's with playing nobody in the non-conference. Go ahead, Steven.
Miami is one of 7 teams in the country with a top 25 offense and a top 25 defense. Steven.
So not all numbers are created equal, because I don't think anyone who has watched Miami's defense play over the course of the entire year looks at that defense and goes, oh, yeah, that's definitely one of the 25 best defensive units in the country.
Steven's actually making some sense for a change. It's a miracle.
I mean, there are a lot of things that can also, inflate or deflate a stat like that, including how good or bad your offense is, because one part of overall defense could just be how much your defense is actually going to be on the field. So if you have a bad offense that can't score, I mean, I'm not sure what Oklahoma's defensive rating is, but I think we all kind of agree a school like Oklahoma has a good defense, but their offense is so bad that their defense has had games where they've given up a lot of points just because they have to be on the field constantly, and that puts them in a bad situation. But in regards to Mario's decision-making at the end of the game, especially that 4th down, I didn't have a problem with him kicking the field goal, but I could also understand why he would want to go for that. The way that I kind of viewed it was, if Mario kicks the field goal, he's probably increasing his team's overall. It probably plays out best for his team's overall chances to potentially win the game, but it also probably plays out worse simultaneously for his team to potentially lose the game. Because obviously, if you win the game, that means that you were able to get a stop, you were able to march down after that, and you were able to score a go-ahead touchdown. If you lose the game, that means you gave the ball back to Syracuse and they just ran out the clock, which is what happened. If you go for it on that 4th down, I think you put yourself most likely in the best situation to either potentially try to tie it in try to tie it in regulation and go to overtime, or you end up being in the exact same position that Miami was at the end of the game, where Syracuse just ends up running out the clock. If you end up going for it and you actually get it, now you're still giving Syracuse the ball back with 4 minutes on the clock, 3 minutes on the clock, or something like that. Syracuse could still march down and win the game, and your offense could potentially never see the ball again. Or if you kick the field goal, you're at least giving yourself a chance to end up actually winning it in regulation, as opposed to just tying it in regulation. Because no matter what, even if you score, your defense still has to get a stop. If you're going to win the game, your defense has to get a stop regardless. It doesn't matter if Syracuse runs out the clock, or it doesn't matter if Syracuse is able to actually march all the way down, get into field goal range, and kick a potential game-winning field goal. I've blasted Mario for a lot of his late game decision making. I actually didn't have a problem with this because I understood where he was going. Because, like I said, no matter what, your defense has to get a stop at some point if you're going to win that game. So if you wanted to play for overtime, then I would say it probably, weirdly enough, would have made more decision, or it would have made more sense to be aggressive in that decision in kind of a weird way. But I did get what Mario was going for. I do think that he really was playing to win the game. And even though it was a conservative decision, I do think that in that case, it was the right decision.
Can I add one quick thing, Gary?
You're talking about 1 second, Matt. You're talking about one stop. And the other argument I was hearing a lot yesterday was, the defense would never, that has been horrible all year, which is what Matt just got done saying, and would never get a stop. Well, let me just remind everybody, against Virginia Tech, they were down by 10 points twice in that game and came back and won because the defense got stops. And then, although I didn't like the prevent defense at the end of the game, they got the stop at the end of the game by the hair of their chinny chin chin. Against Cal, they were down by 25 in that game and came back. You think the defense got a few stops under the gun in that game? And how about the Georgia Tech game? Didn't the defense get the ball back for the offense with a chance to win the game at the end of the game? If Mario had done the same thing that he did on Saturday in the Georgia Tech game, instead of needing a touchdown at the end of the game, I believe Miami would have only needed a field goal, right, to win the game, because they wouldn't have been down by as many points. So, you could break these things down in all different ways, and there's no clear-cut way to go on it. But I just think people are angry, and they're letting their anger just recklessly rip people apart. And I think, a head coach that can't stand on a sideline and say, I think my defense sucks, and let that impact his decisions in the game, he'll make the wrong decision every time. Go ahead, Matt.
Okay, so I'm not going to answer everything everyone said. I mean, people already know Cal just got conservative. People know Georgia Tech couldn't pass the ball at all. I don't need to get into that. But here's the interesting thing, right? So you're talking about Miami being the 24th best defense, and you're right in total yards. And I pointed out how in scoring defense, they're not good, and on third down conversion defense, they're not good. I mean, so the question becomes, how did they do against the ACC on defense? And I did look it up while Gary was going on and wouldn't stop talking. So they played 8 ACC teams, right? 6 of the 8 have had 370 or more yards. Okay. I think 4 of them had 394 or more yards. 3 of them had over 400 yards, including whatever it was last weekend, 470, whatever it was. Okay. So 6 of 8 ACC opponents had 370 or more yards. Do you know what team and what rank they are? If Miami averaged just giving up 370 a game for the whole season, if they had given up 370 a game, and keep in mind they gave up more than 370 against 6 of 8 opponents in the ACC, they would rank 69th in the country, tied with FIU on defense. So these numbers are just malleable. You can pick and choose. They give up 100-something yards, 115 yards against some bad team early in the year. It just skews things. They're not a good defense. This whole, they're top 25 on defense, just like Steven said, it means nothing because they're bad on defense when they play good offenses. Just because they don't.
Would you agree they've made stops through the year? Would you agree with that at least? Would you agree
What?
at least that they have made stops
Of course,
at,
but
at
I would
key
argue,
moments throughout
but
the
I would
season?
argue a lot of times other teams have stopped themselves. Miami has certainly had some great plays. There's no doubt about it, especially early in the year. But as the season's gone on, it just seems like other teams are sort of costing themselves games. Virginia Tech and Cal packing it in, and Wake Forest, couldn't even, Wake Forest was awful on offense, right? They couldn't get anything going. And again, Cal stopped throwing the ball after they got a big lead, or they probably would have won, right? Because they were throwing the ball extremely successfully, even with not a great passing offense. But look, I mean, it's hard to say sometimes whether Miami is that bad or the other team's that good. But when you see it over a whole string of 8 games in the ACC, and you're saying, is this a top 25 Miami defense because of total yard numbers? They're clearly not, because in ACC play, they averaged giving up, like I said, over 370 yards in 6 of 8 games, which would rank them towards the bottom of the country, tied with FIU, okay, if they're just at 370 even. Now, the sad thing about it is, and I've said it before, if you look at the players on defense, Akeem Mesidor, Ruben Bain, even Tyler Barron, Mish Powell, Francisco Mauanoa, even Wesley Bissainth, Darrell Porter, Simeon Barrow, CJ Clark, those are all guys who a year ago we would say these are really good players. Wesley Bissainth maybe not as much, but the other guys, they were all really good players. Mish Powell was on a championship team as the starting nickel and cornerback, and even playing safety the last few games there. You go down the list. Akeem Mesidor a couple of years ago was a monster for Miami defense line. Ruben Bain was a freshman All-American. Francisco Mauanoa could have gone to the NFL, but passed it up, right? He was a leading tackler, tons of big plays, sacks, tackles for loss, etc. Darrell Porter was supposed to be a top cover corner. So because he had a good year the year before, right? The last year he was really good. He was one of the top statistical corners in the country in terms of not allowing completions. So what happened? Tabari Brown started 4 games and looked really good at the end of last year. What happened? This is why fans are saying it's Lance Guidry's fault, because you look at these guys. Simeon Barrow did really well at Michigan State, right? Tyler Barron did really well at Tennessee. So you look at these guys and you say, how is it they're all bad now? How is it that this has turned into a team that gives up over 30 points every game? It can't be the players, because last year and in the past, 9 starters have already shown they're good. So it must be the coaches. That's why fans are blaming the coaches. And I personally think it's both. I think Lance Guidry, like I was trying to say earlier, Gary got off on a tangent a little bit, but he was throwing so much into that game plan. And that's what I was trying to tell people a few minutes ago, like 20 minutes ago, is I think he tried to do too much. I think he was so intent on confusing Kyle McCord that he confused his own players. And you can clearly see they were confused, right? Players even said, defensive players, they didn't talk much after the game, but they did say that there was some confusion, on defense. I think it was actually Cam Ward said that, right? There was some miscommunications on the other side of the ball. And it just never went away. And instead of simplifying it, the way I was telling a friend of mine about it yesterday, who was asking what happened, is like, if you're taking, if you're taking a test for math, right, let's say, and you can do algebra really well, and you can do trigonometry really well, but you're terrible at whatever, name a few other things, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. It doesn't make any sense, obviously, but let's say other things you're bad at. Now, are you bad because the teacher didn't teach you that? Or is the teacher teaching you way too much stuff in a 1-week period for you to learn it all and do well on the test? In this case, I think Lance Guidry was trying to teach them to do too much. And I know they had all season to learn it, but they never learned it. They never learned all of it. And if he could have just figured out the few things they did really well and made those things better, I think they would have been better off for it. I think he was too focused on, we need to do all sorts of variety of things to really confuse the offense, instead of saying, you know what, it's not working what we're doing. Let's just figure out these things that we do well, throw out the rest of it. And yeah, it might look a little basic, but maybe that's a starting point, and it just never, it never gelled on defense. The players didn't play together. They didn't know what the other guy was doing. They were trying to do too much. They were trying to Superman it. And it was just a disaster. And of course it comes back to the coaches, but it's also on the players. It's on everybody. When it's that bad, it's not just the coaches. And I know fans want Lance Guidry fired. I'll leave that up to Mario Cristobal, because, he knows what was supposed to happen, what it was supposed to look like, and he knows how good these players are supposed to be. But if he has a new defensive coordinator, and if Shannon Dawson leaves, a new offensive coordinator, that means in 3 seasons, he'll have had, 4 seasons, he'll have had this will be what, his third new coordinators on both sides of the ball. Am I wrong, or am I counting correctly?
Yeah.
If it
Three
played out
coordinators in
that
4 years is not a recipe for success at any program, because you're putting in a new system every time, and you need to find great coordinators who have longevity. Like, that's the secret, whatever you want to call it, the secret stone crab sauce. If you don't do that, it's like you're starting fresh every year. It hurts recruiting, it hurts personnel, and I don't love it.
Of course, you have to work stone crabs into the conversation.
Of course.
All right, we're not going to go on all morning about the Syracuse game. I mean, we could.
No one wants to hear about it. No one's watching anyway. Who's watching right now that cares about this anymore?
Yeah, nobody. It's over with. It's like there's nothing going to change it. We don't even know what the next game is going to be, so we're going to consider and talk about what's going to improve, or whatever. But I will point out this for those that think that this was just a defensive loss. Okay, in the middle of the game, Miami gave up a 35-7 run after taking a 21-0 lead. The offense went to sleep. Okay, that's 4 or 5 possessions that they had a chance to score points that they didn't score a single point, and Syracuse got hot and caught up. But you get out ahead like that, you shouldn't lose. And it was a team loss, like the Georgia Tech game was a team loss, and they're going to have to reconcile that, because this was a unique opportunity this year with Cam Ward to really have a special season. And now they're at the mercy of the playoff committee that meets tomorrow night, that will basically determine whether Miami is still alive for the college football playoff. So let's turn the page and look ahead to that. Okay. And I've got a story on the website this morning that lays out for you guys the whole resume and argument that the ACC is putting together on behalf of Miami. The ACC as a conference is the one that gets to fight the battle with the committee and make their case. No different than a Heisman Trophy campaign or anything like that. So a lot of time was put in on Saturday and Sunday to prepare the Miami argument to be part of the college football playoff. And I was able to see a copy of that. And I laid out the entire argument for you guys in this story today. Okay, so that's number one. So the committee has to sit down tomorrow night and weigh Miami against what, Alabama, Matt, South Carolina.
Well, it's all going to be a moot point unless, they need Clemson to lose in the ACC title game. But yeah, if Clemson loses, because I would have to think SMU would not be punished for being in the ACC title game and having as many losses and one more win than Miami. So I would think that that as long as that happens, then you're looking at Alabama and South Carolina as the only real 2 challengers to Miami, assuming Clemson loses in the ACC title game.
And they each have 3 losses, correct? So,
and they're both ranked ahead of Miami by 2 and 3 spots, 1 to 3 spots in both polls.
In the AP coaches polls.
And if that poll comes out tomorrow night with the playoff committee and either of those teams ahead of Miami, there's only 1 spot that's expected to be open at this point.
There's just play number 11 and number 12. There could be 2 open spots that they have flexibility with.
Well, right now it appears there'll be 1 is what everyone thinks.
I don't know. I saw one prediction yesterday that Miami would be the number 11 seed. So I don't know.
No. They'll be the 11 seed, but the 12th seed is going to Arizona State or whoever wins that conference.
Okay. All right. One open spot. So there's 1 open spot.
Yeah, they'll be the 11th seed if they're in. Whether it's Alabama, South Carolina, Miami, they'll be the 11th seed, but there'll be a 12th seed team that's worse than them. But that's automatic.
Fair enough. Okay. Yeah. So there's 1 variable spot that the committee is going to have. Now, how do you pick? There's several 3-loss teams in the SEC, and I don't have the standings right in front of me. I believe there's 3 or 4 of them in the SEC. How do you pick one of those to go to the college football playoff? A 3-loss team, and you're picking 1 out of 3 or 4. How do you pick one of them? I don't see how you do that. I really don't. Okay, so that's and maybe I'm a little partial towards Miami, but I'm just saying that I don't see how this committee is going to pick 1 3-loss SEC team to go to the playoff. It would be a travesty. Okay, they'd be screwing the other SEC teams that have 3 losses, and they would be screwing teams like Miami that only have 2. Way too many people getting screwed if they do that. So I'm thinking maybe common sense prevails, and they don't do that, and they say those 3-loss SEC teams just aren't making it this year. that's where this Miami resume that the ACC is laying out comes into play. And Heather Dinich of ESPN came out yesterday and said she thinks Miami will get the spot. I'm not going to make that kind of prediction. But Matt, it's a very interesting decision that this committee has to make when they meet tomorrow. And I can't wait to see. We'll be doing CaneSport Live on Tuesday night, and I hope you all you guys out there join us for the CaneSport Live show on Tuesday night, because the rankings will come out during the show, and we'll be talking about them. And it's going to be very interesting when they do come out, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is somewhat silly. You know, we were always fighting over who should the top 2 teams be. Now it's who should the 11th team be out of 12, right? But like, so here's an example of what we're talking about. And Gary and I argued about this before, because I said I can see a scenario where a 3-loss team would get in ahead of a 2-loss team. Gary says it'll never happen. There should never be a 3-loss team as an at-large team in the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. But here's what the situation is that this committee has to weigh. Miami has 2 losses. One now is a ranked Syracuse team, which is actually good, right? They lost to a ranked team. That's better than losing to an unranked team. And the other obviously is an unranked team in Georgia Tech. So they have 2 losses. The problem comes in that Miami has not beat a single ranked team. By
the way, one thing real quick, Matt, you can't dismiss the street credibility that Georgia Tech picked up the other night, the way they played Georgia.
That's fine. I have no problem with that. But
that's a factor in the head of the committee members.
Well then, if there's that, like, do you look at and say a 1-point loss by South Carolina to a ranked team? Should that not matter either? Like, you know, you can play it any way you want, right? You can say, oh, well, this helps Miami, but you have to do it both ways. So the facts are Miami has not beaten a top 25 team, big picture. The fact is Miami's lost 2 of its last 3 games at the end of the season, which tends to weigh very, very heavily in these ranking systems. So now you look at South Carolina, which, by the way, is ranked behind Alabama, okay? South Carolina has won its last 6 games, including against a ranked number 12 Clemson team before number 12 when they played, okay? That team has 3 losses, though. Those 3 losses were to number 13 Alabama by 3 points, to LSU by 3 points. I'm sorry, to Alabama by 2 points, to LSU by 3 points, and they lost to number 15, current number 15, Ole Miss. Got killed by them 27-3 earlier in the season. They've won their last 6, including against number 20 Texas A&M, including against number 24 Missouri, and including number 12 Clemson. That's all in the last 6 games. So in the last 6 games, they've beaten 3 ranked teams, and they've won 6 in a row. So how do you sit there as a committee and say, well, Miami hasn't beaten anyone in the top 25 rankings for any of the major services, but, you know, they've lost 2 games. Yeah, South Carolina's beaten 3 ranked teams in its last 6 games, and they were 6-0 streak. Miami's on a 1-2 streak, but Miami deserves it because they lost 1 less game in a much easier schedule. That's where I have a problem. Like, I'm not going to be a Miami homer here and sit here and say Miami should get it because of X, Y, and Z, because, you know, Miami's in the ACC. Miami deserves – the ACC should have 2 teams no matter what. It doesn't matter. ACC should have 2 teams. I firmly believe that the best team should be in the playoffs. It could be 6 ACC teams next year and 1 SEC team. I just want the best teams rewarded. I'm done with the politics of these stupid systems. Like, you know, Alabama will get a better rating on TV, so they're going to be ahead of South Carolina. South Carolina deserves it ahead of Alabama. And if the committee gives that final spot to Alabama, it's a travesty, and it's just because of Alabama's name. And the hate of Miami is real. And Miami maybe doesn't deserve it this year, but if they did deserve it and weren't in, I would be sitting here screaming and yelling. But you know what? Miami doesn't deserve to be in the playoffs over South Carolina. That's how I see it. I'm sorry, Miami fans. I know you all hate me anyway.
Well,
so
and what if Georgia loses to Texas? Now they have 3 losses. They would be a 3-loss SEC team.
Who are you talking about?
Georgia, if they lose to Texas.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
And
you can. And that's the other thing. I don't want the committee punishing teams for playing really good opponents, and I don't want the committee punishing teams for playing in conference championship games. Because then why the hell are we having those conference championship games? And then why the hell are we going to play any tough games ever if you're going to punish them for that? That's why I keep saying 3 losses against tough teams like Miami loves to play normally instead of 2 losses against patsies. I'm taking the 3-loss team that frickin' played great competition, beat ranked teams all day long over 2-loss teams, unlike Gary Ferman.
Yeah, but if you end up with Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina all sitting there with 3 losses, like, and you're the committee, like,
you keep looking at it as SEC can't have you can't pick an SEC. I look at it as teams. I'm not saying, oh, this conference, that conference. I understand certain conferences you have to have an automatic bid. Once it comes to the free bids, I'm not looking at conferences at all anymore. I'm looking at the quality of the teams, the quality of their wins, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not saying, oh, well, we can't have a fourth SEC team or a fifth SEC team and only one ACC team. I don't care. At that point, that goes out the window. You take the best teams, you put them in, because that's what I want to have happen every year. It's why FSU got screwed last year. Like, I'm done with that. Just put the best teams with the best resumes, with the best records in the frickin' playoffs, period. And right now, Miami's not one of them. They lost 2 of the last 3. They don't deserve it, quite frankly. And you know what? Seeing the young guys play and seeing the future on display in a bowl game is not the end of the world for Miami right now, because from what I've seen, they're not winning the national championship anyway. We may as well move on to next year. They lost 2 out of 3 games. They blew a 21-0 lead against a good Syracuse team, not a great Syracuse team. Like, that's embarrassing. That team, like, I'm not putting my Miami hat. Would I love to see them play Notre Dame in the first round of the playoffs at Notre Dame? Sure. But they don't deserve it over South Carolina. And I'm a Miami reporter saying that. I'm a Miami, at my heart, I'm a Miami fan, obviously, but I'm a reporter. My reporter hat being on, like, they don't deserve it. And I'll say it honestly. The committee might give it to them because Miami's got good ratings over South Carolina too, just like Alabama does. But how do you have a team that lost 2 of the last 3 games, the last one in embarrassing fashion, going to the playoffs over a team that won 6 in a row, including against 3 ranked opponents? I don't understand how that'll happen. Maybe it will. And if you're a South Carolina fan, I'm going to say too bad, and I love it, but like, they don't deserve it. Miami does not deserve it. Could it happen? Yes, but they won't deserve it.
Well, these rankings are going to be very interesting Tuesday night. And
South Carolina deserves it over Alabama, by the way. I already said that, but I want to reiterate that this whole Alabama love thing is ridiculous.
Listen, the college football playoff is not an ACC postseason tournament. Okay, they don't need to get 4 teams in the damn tournament.
It's not about the conferences. It's
really
a
don't even.
System.
Yeah, I understand. They don't need 4 teams. They've played a regular season for a reason. They've had a championship team for a reason.
They give an automatic bid to each conference. They don't say, okay, only 3 from a conference can go. You're making this stuff up. They can't have 4 teams in a conference go. You're making it up. That's not a rule. I don't know what you're talking about.
If you have lost 3 games in your conference, you don't belong in the 12-team college football playoff. That's just my opinion.
Well, Clemson will have done that, or have they only lost 2 in the conference? How many games did Clemson lose in conference play? Only 2.
They've lost 3. They've lost 3 games.
Clemson's lost 3 total. They've only lost 1.
If they beat SMU, they
their only loss was to Louisville.
1 in the conference. You're right. Yeah.
Right. So if they beat SMU, they get in anyway because they get the automatic berth, and then SMU would get in probably still anyway as so Miami does need SMU to win that game Saturday. I agree with that. All right, let's move on to recruiting because it's just become insane. Florida and Oregon have opened up the purse strings. What's happened at Florida is they made the decision to keep Billy Napier. They decided we are not going to spend $20 million on a buyout. We're going to put our money into NIL. And then Oregon's got the biggest NIL in the budget because Phil Knight will give them whatever they need. So those 2 schools are throwing an absolute nuclear bomb into recruiting and NIL because they are upping the ante for every player they want, and they are attacking different recruiting classes, including Miami's. And it looks like they're stealing Hilton Stubbs away from Miami, a safety from upstate who arguably is the top prospect in Miami's recruiting class, Stephen. And I'll let you comment on that. But, credit Florida. I mean, they came in and dropped the big bag on the table, and Hilton Stubbs, who was always somewhat interested in them anyway, they got him to come to campus on Sunday, and basically he didn't go home until he had agreed to flip the Gators, and it looks like they're going to get him. And then Miami's also fighting tooth and nail for Gavin Nix, another one of their commitments that Oregon's trying to steal. They're fighting Ohio State to try to swing TJ Alford Miami's way. What do you think, man? Do you just load up the bags, or do you try to have some fiscal responsibility when you're recruiting these high school players? And if the price gets too high, you got to pass.
Well, if we're talking about budget, I think that's a completely different conversation than, quite frankly, that's a conversation that your NIL collective CFO should be having about, do we want to allocate a ton of NIL dollars to the portal, or do we want to allocate a ton of that money to high school players? That's its own completely separate conversation. But as far as what's going on with Stubbs and Nix, so I'll start with Gavin Nix. So I think right now, or at least what we knew Sunday night, it sounded very likely that he was going to end up at Oregon. So basically what happened there was Oregon was one of his finalists whenever he committed to Miami. He took official visits to Miami, to Florida State, and to Oregon this summer. Oregon was always really high on him. He committed to Miami over Oregon in part because it kind of made sense for him to stay in state. He was really open to that. Oregon, all throughout the fall, kind of remained a little bit of a dark horse. They were kind of, like lurking in the shadows almost, so to speak. Then what Oregon's doing to Miami is exactly what Mario Cristobal has done to other schools. They kind of lurk in the shadows, they stay in contact, and then when the moment's right, they pounce. Oregon kind of sensed that the moment was right. And there was a time earlier this fall where Oregon was really making a concerted push for Gavin Nix. And it looked like there was a little bit of momentum picking up on the Oregon side. Now, Gavin Nix ultimately ended up coming to Miami for the Florida State game, and it looked like Miami had smoothed things out. It really looked like Miami had kind of, reaffirmed their position. It looked like they were back on really good footing with Nix, and we all kind of said, all right, well, that was the end of that. Nix kind of had his little dance with Oregon. Now he's back fully locked in with Miami. We were all really confident that he was going to end up signing with Miami, and that was completely the end of his recruitment. Well, Oregon, which is a lot like what Miami has done in the past and what Mario Cristobal has done in the past, they didn't go away. They just kind of kept lurking. They kept lurking. And then finally, this weekend, they made their move. They made a really, really big push for Nix. And right now, I really do believe Nix is trending toward the Ducks. If I had to kind of, say what my percentage is, I think I'm probably about 65-35 that he ends up at Oregon as opposed to Miami. Now, again, I want to emphasize that recruiting is so fluid right now. There is so much that can happen. Literally every single recruit status is day to day. This stuff can and will change at the drop of the hat or the drop of a bag, so to speak. Miami would really like to keep Gavin Nix in this class if they can. They're going to fight to keep Gavin Nix in this class, but right now it's definitely trending toward Oregon. I would not be very confident about Miami's chances to end up landing Nix if I'm a Hurricanes fan. Then I'll flip over to Stubbs. His recruitment's a little bit different. So Stubbs initially, whenever his recruitment kind of started getting going a little bit, whenever he was a high school junior last season, or during the fall, during his junior year, while a lot of other programs were focusing on 2024 recruits, a couple started focusing on some 2025s, and he was always a guy that a lot of us just figured would end up at Florida. He was a really strong Florida lean. He was really vocal that he was a Florida lean. He didn't try to hide any of this. There's probably a dozen articles written about him from last fall up until the spring that kind of talked about how high he was on the Gators and how much he liked Florida. Well, the spring comes, he shockingly commits to USC, and that stunned all of us. We always knew that Miami was going to be in the picture, but really, we all kind of felt like he was a player who was going to be Florida's to lose. And I mean, you can look at the Florida message boards. If you go over to Gators Online and you go back to those threads from the spring, whenever he committed to USC, quite a few people were freaking out, kind of saying, man, I thought this was a kid who was going to be a shoo-in for us. I thought it was just going to be a given that he would end up at Florida. And quite frankly, I viewed it that way too. I viewed it as kind of a colossal mishandling, a colossal failure of his recruitment on Florida's part that they allowed him to go to USC. Well, We get into the summer. He decommits from USC, effectively flips to Miami. Miami is feeling great about how locked in he is with the Gators. It looks really, really good. And quite frankly, a lot of us thought, man, I really think Hilton Stubbs might be done with his recruitment. I really think that might be the end of it. Stubbs ends up, coming to Miami a bunch of times. He's really vocal about how good he feels with his commitment. He thinks he made the right decision. He can't wait to be a Hurricane. And, we're all feeling pretty good. We're all assuming, this is dude who's probably going to end up coming to Miami. Well, lo and behold, last week, Florida ends up picking things up in a pretty major way. They start making that really aggressive, hard push. Then Sunday, he ends up going to Florida's campus. And like you said, Gary, they didn't let him leave until he was saying that he was going to flip to Florida. Right now, which again, that is something that Mario Cristobal has done in the past. Now he's having it done to him. I came in last year and actually my first year here, my first signing day here was December 2022. Mario's coveted 2023 class, the one that had Francis Malago in it. That was kind of my first exposure to seeing what, Mario's, closing time actually means, what Mario breaking out the loafers really means. And then I saw it again last year. I had all these doubts where, this time last year where I was saying, man, I'm really not sure, who Miami's going to get, how many dudes are they really in the mix for? Who can Mario really end up pulling, just nailing? And all of a sudden, Justin Scott flips, and then Jordan Lyle flips, and then Adarius Hayes flips, and then Armando Blunt flips. Right now, Miami is playing defense. They are having to hold on for dear life. They are on the completely other end of the spectrum. Miami isn't necessarily on the attack as much right now as they are playing defense, trying to hold on for dear life to the guys that they currently have in this class. Because they're still going to try to get DJ Pickett. They're still going to try to get TJ Alford. They're still going to try to get Jarquez Carter. They're still going to try to get Ben Hanks. But quite frankly, right now, I don't love Miami's chances with any of those guys. And, we're taping this on Monday morning, so who knows? Maybe by Monday afternoon, I'll be singing a completely different tune. I'll be saying, Miami's going to go ahead and flip DJ Pickett. They're going to get Alford too. They're going to get Carter. They're going to get Hanks. They're going to load up this class. They're going to finish back in the top 10. But as of Monday morning, I do not feel great. And if I'm a Miami fan, quite honestly, I'm sweating a little bit because, for as vaunted as Mario's close is supposed to be, this has not been a great close. And I definitely think there's a little bit of room for anxiety with the talent that Miami seems to be poised to lose in this class.
Well, there's still 48 hours left, so we'll see what happens. So, listen, we have coverage on all this stuff on the website for you right now. And we are going to be following this last 48 hours of recruiting minute to minute. You guys know I've always traditionally called it the fog of war. It's going to be a little different this year because signing day is kind of sneaking up on everybody because it's a few weeks earlier than it's ever been before. So it's kind of weird, quite frankly, that we're sitting here conference championship week and have signing day in the middle of it. I'm not sure who came up with that brilliant idea. But it is what it is. And Miami is not playing a game this week, which is good because it lets them focus entirely on recruiting. And then after signing day on Wednesday, the beginning of next week, the portal opens up and guys are starting to declare themselves as getting ready to enter the portal. So there's going to be all that recruiting going on. So we are going to be, absolutely all over this stuff for you guys. If you are not yet a subscriber to CaneSport.com, please come over to our website right now. We got a special introductory offer, $1 for your first 7 days. Come check it out. We think you'll be happy. Come join our community of fans. We got a great community of fans on our message boards. They're a little angry right now. They're really, 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 really pissed off, okay? I spent all day Sunday doing questions and answers with the fans, and man, the anger was like flying through my my screens. I did it on, sometimes on the laptop, sometimes on a desktop, sometimes on my phone all day long. We were going back and forth on all these different subjects, and you could literally feel the heat coming through all those devices. So if you're not a subscriber, come on over, join CaneSport. We don't think that you will be unhappy, and we do everything we can do every single day of the week to make your fan experience the best that it could possibly be. So that is going to do it for Good Morning CaneSport right now. Like I said, a ton of coverage on the website. Get over there, check it all out, and we will be bringing you all the breaking news here as the day goes forward. So for Stephen Wagner and Matt Shodell, I'm Gary Ferman. Thanks again for joining us this morning. We'll see you next time, everybody.